Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and this is a recap of Week 5 for the NFL. We're going to take a look at this week's games, take a look at next week's sort of the standings, what we're thinking in terms of playoff pictures and such. But before we get into that, our annual tradition of past and present, we'll go past first. So past, talk about this guy's school, where he went. So Ohio State grad, played for the Eagles, then the Vikings, and then the Dolphins. Ohio State, Philly, Minnie, and Miami. He was a part of the 1987 supplemental draft and went in the 4th round. Walter Payton, Man of the Year. And I would argue, here's your bigger hint. With one of these teams, had it not been for one of the greatest NFL wide receivers of all time, he would have been the greatest wide receiver to have ever played for this team. I know that's sort of vague, but maybe that will help you out. If you need a little bit more time, go ahead and pause. The answer to this, it's Chris Carter with the Vikings. You know, this guy made catches that no one else had really seen before in the NFL up until that point, and then you paired him with Randy Moss, and Randy Moss just electrified. He did things on a football field that you had never seen before. And one of the bigger ones that a lot of people talk about is Randy beat the Tampa 2 over. And Tampa 2 over is both of the safeties are bailing to the outside in order to make sure no one gets over the top of the safety. Randy would be matched man-on-man with a corner with safety over the top help. It would still beat them deep. And if you want to watch a game where he did it 3 times in a row, it was against Dallas in the Thanksgiving game. It's still one of the greatest stats. I think it was 3 catches for 165 yards and like 3 touchdowns. It was unreal. Randy completely changed that team. But before him, Chris Carter was a stud. Still a stud. I would still put him as one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. Chris Carter always made the catch. He was sort of like Larry Fitzgerald of, our days of watching football. Always a reliable guy that if you threw the ball to him, this dude was going to catch it. He had hands the size of saucer plates. Like, Chris Carter was unreal. After Miami, they had the whole riverboat. Randy left, goes to the Raiders. Chris eventually goes to Miami. Both of them never really fared well until Randy went on to the Patriots and had the tremendous success, wasn't able to cap off the undefeated season. But from that standpoint, Chris Carter, Hall of Fame wide receiver by all means, one of the best in Minnesota history. Had it not been for Randy, would have been the best. It truly spectacular guy. I've heard nothing but good things about him, so that's our past. For our present, this is a good one because I think it's going to be difficult. I'll give you a hint in terms of he did go to 3 schools. So if you know any of the first 2, you're a football wizard, hats off to you. But this guy is Tank Dell. He's playing for the Houston Texans. Fantasy guys I know love him because he has been on an absolute tear here lately with catching the football. But where did he go to school? So if you don't know, there are 3. That was your big hint. If you don't have the answer, go ahead and pause because I'm going to explain them to you. The very first answer is Texas A&M. He played there first in 2018. Then he went to Independence Community College, the junior college that was shown on Last Chance U in 2019. But the school that he graduated from, it's Houston. So he's a hometown kid. Played with the Houston Cougars. He's now with the Houston Texans. You can tell he's developed that relationship with C.J. Stroud. They look amazing. The Texans have performed well above what I think a lot of people expected them to. And especially a lot of that's due to C.J. Stroud. I mean, C.J. Stroud of the rookie quarterbacks has by far looked the best. There's been a lot of controversy this past week that you can tell a lot of people in the Panthers organization, I think, wanted C.J. Stroud, and it's appearing right now that their owner said, no, we're taking Bryce Young. Would he have done better than Bryce is doing right now? I like to think so, just based upon his play. I think that, especially from the quickness of his release, finding open guys, getting them open, C.J. Stroud has shown that he's playing the best of all the quarterbacks right now. I think that, and the reason I say this above Bryce is that when you watched Andy Dalton come in and play against Seattle, the game that Bryce was out, the offense looked way more efficient. I think that Bryce is still a rookie. He's still learning. Or am I writing him off right now? No. However, when you take a step right now and say, if you could redo the draft this second, who would the Panthers take? They're taking C.J. Stroud, and it's not a question to it. That would be their quarterback that they take. The Texans got him. They get Will Anderson with trading up. They look great. For being a team that a lot of people thought would finish dead last in that division, the Texans are not just competing better than people thought. They're also competing to win the division, and we'll get in that here in a second. But taking a look at last week's games, I'd like to say the big one was Chicago just proving that they're not the worst team in the NFL. The Broncos got the chance to prove that on Sunday. For the Bears, I know we talked a little bit on last week's episode. Fields looks a lot better. And one of my buddies, I was talking to him, and he brought up the whole point that I've been talking about, how coaching doesn't necessarily win games, but it loses games. The other part of this is that, why does that happen? Coaches have the ability, just like players, like when you see a rookie quarterback that has a really good year, goes into the sophomore year, like Baker Mayfield's really the last one that really looked good his rookie year, goes into sort of a sophomore slump. NFL teams start to pick up on what's happening with, what are your weaknesses as a player? If you have a tendency to scramble, where is it to? How do teams react to that? They're going to put coverages in certain positions that they know that you're weak at. The same thing happens with an offensive and defensive coordinator. If they see that, hey, on down and distance, more than 3rd and 5, this is what this guy likes to call, I can guarantee you the opposing team knows that, and they're going to situate their defense at a position to be able to battle that tendency more often. When you look at the Bears, it goes without saying that they have struggled from not just an offensive coordinator, but I would also argue from a head coaching perspective for years, really since Lovie Smith left. Is that changing? I don't think so. I think that what you're seeing is you're seeing talent on the field outperform what the coaching is allowing right now. They play two bad teams. Let's get that out of the way. The Broncos aren't good. The Commanders have failed to live up to potential year after year. I think this is Ron Rivera's last year with the Commanders, especially under new ownership. You take a look at those two teams that they battle, it's a struggle. The Bears have a great chance this weekend to prove that they're one of the better teams in the division as they go against the Vikings. The Vikings losing Justin Jefferson. He just went on the IR today. He's going to be out for at least 4 games. Their offense, when Justin Jefferson left the game, the Vikings were a completely different team. Now, the Vikings ended up still battling the Chiefs pretty well, only losing by 7. I say that pretty well. The Vikings lost that game throughout because they kept making mistakes. I mean, the opening drive, your tight end fumbles and gives it right over to the Chiefs. There's just times in that game that the Vikings had chances. That's sort of been the Vikings this whole year. And I don't want to put that solely on Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins' stats look like he should be playing at an MVP level. However, when you look at the team, more times than not, they are finding ways to give the ball to the opponent and turn the ball over. You're so frustrated with watching the Vikings because there's so much potential there, and they are literally shooting themselves in the foot each and every time. But that's and when we sort of talk about transitioning over to the NFC North, I do want to sort of do this like I did last time with talking about the divisions. You got the Vikings coming up on a pivotal matchup against the Bears, it's really deciding, in my opinion, who's going to be second in the division. I get that the Packers humiliated the Bears on opening weekend. I would be willing to say that if you put the Bears and the Packers on the field this week, the Bears are probably going to be the favorite. Jordan Love he's looking rough around the edges. There was a couple, anytime you get a tip ball and it's a pick, you sort of want to sit back and have an asterisk next to that interception. But a couple, especially that first pick that he threw, I mean, the linebacker's sitting right there. The game's coming fast. I saw a tweet this morning that was still good. I know I talked about it last week, but it's reemphasized with this point. Aaron Rodgers was like 2-3 in his first 5 starts. I think that year they were like 7-9, weren't a playoff team. A lot of people were questioning, is Rodgers the guy now that Favre's left the building? The same thing's happening to Love. It's difficult to sit back and say that Love's going to be, oh, don't worry, he'll be like Aaron Rodgers. That's impossible to say. Anyone that tells you that he's going to be is a liar. Anyone that tells you that he's not going to be, it's not that they're a liar. It's just statistics are on their side that says that he's not going to be. I think for the Packers, the issue is that you've surrounded him, Love, who I'm speaking about, with, I would say, mediocre talent that Rodgers had, that Rodgers was able to elevate. He has good guys around him. I'm not saying that the team's terrible. What I'm saying is there's not those superstars. Like if you were to add a Justin Jefferson, add a Tyreek Hill, add guys that help Love look even better, then Love has a really good chance. But this idea that sort of how they treated Favre, how they treated Rodgers, where these guys are so good, they're just going to elevate the guys around them to play better. You can't do that to a young quarterback, which is why I know for me, I predicted the Packers to finish last in the division, and this is why. When you don't surround a kid with talent, he's going to struggle. Can he still make plays and win games? Absolutely. I think he's a talented kid. The issue is when you don't put a lot of talent around him, you never really get to see his full potential. Once you get a guy like Patrick Mahomes, which is rare air, you can allow Tyreek Hill to leave. You can allow other guys to leave, and they elevate the guys around them. It's too early right now to say anything of like that for Love. Now for the Lions, you sit back and look at them. They handled business. Beat the mess out of the Panthers. That was sort of expected. Going into this week, you got them playing the Buccaneers. I think it's a good test for the Lions just because the Bucs have a good defense. It will show more of the Lions in terms of their offensive capabilities going against a deeper team like the Bucs on their defense. And I think it gives the Vikings defense, the Lions defense, a better chance to prove themselves against a quality NFC opponent. Bakers look good. They've got Mike Evans. They got Chris Godwin. They have talent on the offensive side, and the Buccaneers are not a bad team. The Buccaneers are, I would argue, a pretty good team. They should be favorites in the NFC South. It's a good chance for the Lions to prove themselves going forward. Talking about the Bucs, the Bucs are sitting there at 3-1. You've got Atlanta and New Orleans both at 3-2. The Bucs are coming off a bye. They have a whole week to prep for the Lions. The Panthers are sitting there at 0-4. You really wonder where the Panthers are going in this division and how ugly it's going to get. And for the Panthers, it really kills them because they don't own their own first-round pick next year. The Bears do. So for the Panthers, that's why you've heard them talking about trying to go out and find a new number one wide receiver, is because they're not going to be able to take that position off the board next year. You would think that they would love to go out and get someone. When you look at the guys that are out there, probably the number one guy that's going to go off the board from the receiving position, in my opinion, is Brock Bowers coming out of Georgia. I think he's the best tight end that's been out in the draft since Kyle Pitts, and I think he's better than Kyle Pitts. That's from when you watch him on the field, what he's been able to do, the coverage he's been able to draw, he's been able to beat that with guys knowing since his freshman year that this guy is a problem, and he continually performs. So that's why I think he's going to be so high in this year's draft. The Panthers are catching a hit stick. Now they got to go play the Dolphins. I don't like that matchup for the Panthers. It's sort of like what I said last week about the Cowboys getting the floor mopped with them with the 49ers. I think that the Dolphins beat the Panthers pretty handily. Right now, the game's a 13.5-point spread. I'm taking the Dolphins with that spread. It's too lucrative. I think the Dolphins can easily beat them by 21 points. It's a matter of, can Carolina establish a rushing game against Miami? That's about the only chance they have to stay in this game. The issue is I think teams load the box and say, well, Bryce Young is going to have to beat us, and your wide receivers aren't good enough to get separation. Thielen's catching balls, but in terms of them consistently, when you look at their squad as a whole, saying, hey, they have really good playmakers to get out there and make Bryce Young look good, they don't, which is the exact same argument that I've given just a few minutes ago, that for Love, when you don't surround a guy with a lot of talent, it really hurts there at the end. Taking a look at the Saints, they go in and they do what I don't think a lot of people saw them doing, which was beating the brakes off of New England. New England's not a good football team right now. We'll get into that more here in a minute. But from the perspective of what the Saints are able to do, you're looking for that consistency out of the Saints and out of Carr. They get Kamara. They have potential with the wide receivers. For some reason, Michael Thomas hasn't gotten put on the IR, and we're now going in to week 6. There are things that you sit back and you look at this team and you go, I would put them in the running for the division, but at the same time, they'll show you games like they did, and I get that Carr exited and they lost versus the Packers. There's just things about this team that you can tell you don't like. That's ultimately how I'm going to say it. I think the Bucs have the higher potential in terms of what you've seen so far on the field. However, the Saints have the higher potential based upon the talent they have on the field. I love the Saints offense. I love Chris Olave. He's a game changer. Kamara is way better than any other running back inside the NFC South outside of Bijan Robinson because of what Bijan does on the outside, lined up in wide receiver. All the different ways the Falcons use him, I really like the versatility of Bijan. Kamara, I just give him the edge from a running back perspective because of the experience. He's shown it time and time again. He's difficult to stop. On paper, the Saints should be the team of the division, but right now the Buccaneers' defense is really showing out, which leaves us with the Falcons. I want to say this time and time again, until the Falcons can prove that offensively Desmond Ridder can get it together, the Falcons are going to continue to struggle in games. They were very fortunate to get past Houston, plain and simple. Houston, as much hype as I just talked about C.J. Stroud, they're still not a complete football team. You would not pick if they were to somehow win the AFC South, you wouldn't by any means pick them to win a playoff game when you start putting them against playoff caliber teams. For the Falcons to struggle like they did, it's not a good sign for them going forward in their division. I personally think the Falcons still finished third ahead of the Panthers, but behind the Saints and Buccaneers. It's just how the season's lining up so far. Speaking of the Texans, we'll just go ahead and go straight to the AFC South. The Jaguars shelled out and beat Buffalo in London again. They had their second straight game. I think for the Jags, it helped that they played that week in London the week prior against the Falcons and were able to just stay in London. They stayed in London the entire time, didn't fly back home. You're not having to deal with a jet lag. You could tell something was off with that Buffalo team. From the Jaguars' perspective, they looked really good, and Trevor Lawrence was throwing some absolute dimes. That pass that he threw to Calvin Ridley on the sideline, that's a Hall of Fame pass. Like in terms of the best quarterback that you could ask for throwing that football, that's as good as you get. The other way I'd put it is that's a ball that Darrelle Revis couldn't stop. Overside the outside shoulder, in stride. There's nothing that you can do as a cornerback. He threw the perfect pass to put him into that position, and they were able to fend off Buffalo's late surge, and they consistently were running. ETN, and I said this sort of at week 2 point, I think, that the struggles that the Jaguars were having early in the season was because they were not establishing the running game. ETN's coming on. The more the Jags are able to threaten teams with ETN speed out of the backfield and get a running game established, the better the Jags are going to play. I still have them as the favorite in the division. I like the Jags offensively. I like them defensively. They have good players. Like, the Jags are not a bad football team, and they showed it against Buffalo. You know, Buffalo is a team that just came off of beating Miami, who put up 70 points against, I get, the Broncos, but it's still a big game for Jacksonville to come in and win. The rest of the division, the Colts, you know, they lose Anthony Richardson. Gardner Minshew has proven that he can still be a good quarterback, beat the Ravens a few weeks ago. They beat the Titans this past week. Those are the type of things that you want to see out of the Colts. However, from the Colts' perspective, it's only going to get more difficult. You want Anthony Richardson back there because of how athletic he is and the things that he can do at the position of quarterback. I think it opens up their offense more. Zach Moss has been playing out of his mind, which is nuts that Zach Moss has played as well as he has, but they still signed Jonathan Taylor to that huge deal. Zach Moss is the best running back on the team right now, but you paid Jonathan Taylor all that money. If Taylor doesn't show out, it yet again goes to hurt this running back market, which I feel like we've already beaten that dead horse. You want to see what they have. I get it's Taylor's first game back, coming off injuries, got to get into the flow of the game. However, for the Colts, what I will say about them is if they can get both of those backs going, the Colts are going to be a problem for every team in the AFC South. They have the ability to win the division. The issue is can they stay healthy at the position of quarterback? I like Gardner Minshew. Do I think he's that playoff caliber quarterback that you want? No. I put him in the same boat as like Taylor Heineke. Here's a guy that can win you games, but at no point is he going to elevate the whole team to play to this next level that really every franchise is trying to find with a quarterback. I just don't see that out of Gardner Minshew. The next few teams, two teams in the division, you got the Texans and the Titans. The Titans continue to struggle with games that they shouldn't struggle in. Anthony Richardson leaves, Titans can't figure it out. You look at this upcoming week for the Titans, they're getting they're getting the Ravens. Like, here's a team, the Ravens are down. They have a ton of injuries. They don't look good against Pittsburgh. They allow Pittsburgh to come back and win last week. The Titans should have a good chance against the Ravens. The Ravens are a 4-point home favorite. They're over in London. You sit back, and for me, this is we're getting into this range for the Titans where I'm starting to say, hey, these are starting to sort of become must-win games if you want to be a playoff team in the AFC. AFC's loaded this year. They have a lot of divisions have really good teams. If the Titans continue to lose to some of these lower level teams, it's going to hurt them here in a few weeks when it's really starting to get into playoff games that matter. I don't have any faith in the Titans. I have more faith in the Houston Texans. I think the Texans have the quarterback that they want in C.J. Stroud. I'd put him any day above Ryan Tannehill. That's sort of where the Titans are for me is Tannehill. When he has an okay game, the Titans, the running game's able to get established. When Tannehill can't throw, they look terrible. And more times than not, Tannehill can't throw the football. C.J. Stroud showing what he needs to. Give me the Texans to push out the Titans. That's just where I have them right now. I think right now I'd give the edge to the Jags just because of head coach, just because of all the other pieces on the team to win the division. And I have the Texans right there at number 2. Due to injuries, they got the Colts 3 and Titans 4. That's just sort of how I see the division right now in terms of layout. We'll see how it goes going forward. We talk about the Ravens. You know, they have that big loss to the Steelers. Right now, the Steelers are in the lead of the division. You got two teams that are 3-2, which are the Steelers and the Ravens. Then you've got the Browns at 2-2 and the Bengals at 2-3. Browns have an off week, and Browns catch the hardest matchup of them all. They got to play the 49ers. I think it's a great matchup, though, for the Browns to really test where they're at. You have the Browns that get a chance to, now that I believe they were coming off a bye last week, and they were, you get Watson a little bit healthy. You're going against, I would argue, the best playing team right now, not just in the NFC, but in all of football in the 49ers. Can their defense slow down the 49ers, and can their offense protect Watson and be able to distribute the football? If the answer to either one of those questions is no, then they're going to lose that football game. Right now, San Francisco is a 5.5-point favorite over the Browns, or excuse me, a 7-point favorite over the Browns. I sit back and I like Garrett's ability to sack the quarterback. I think that Cleveland's defense is a lot better than people think that they are. That I know they've had bad performances this year, especially 2 weeks ago when Watson didn't play. They got blown out by the Ravens. You're just looking for the Browns to prove that they're not the Browns. Maybe I'm giving them too much hope. Maybe it's because the Lions look like they finally turned it around. Right now, though, I'd argue that it's the Ravens in the division. However, and I get that they were playing the Cardinals, I think the Cardinals are a lot better team. If the Bengals can develop the deep ball, which they developed last week against the Cardinals, then the Bengals are the favorite to win the division. Even though the Bengals are sitting where they're at 2-3. You sit it this week, looking at the Bengals, they're able to pick up a good matchup against Seattle. They get them at home. I sit back. I like Seattle in this matchup just because of Seattle's ability to throw and run the football. If Cincinnati can find a way to beat Seattle it's yet again another stepping stone, but they have to be able to throw the ball deep. The way they started off that game against the Cardinals, I really liked, which was get the ball out of Burrow's hand as quick as humanly possible. Let's run slants. Let's run drags. Let's find ways to get our receivers open, all without T. Higgins, mind you, in order to be able to loosen up the Cardinals defense and get them to play more coverage than trying to get after Burrow because the ball was coming out of his hands so quick. When I sit back and look at the Bengals, their only chance is to outscore people. Their defense just hasn't been that defense this year that I sit back and I go, man, like they're playing really well. I don't see that out of the Bengals. We'll just see how their offense keeps performing. I'd give the edge right now to the Bengals. I know it's one game and that's hard to say. They have, of the teams in the division that have the most potential, it is the Bengals. They didn't lose that much from last year in terms of personnel. You just have to give them the edge. I don't like the way the Ravens are playing right now. They look lost in terms of offensive capability. They have a ton of injuries. The Browns, you sit back, they just haven't proven to me that the Browns aren't going to do Browns things. And from the Steelers got lucky. Like, let's be honest. Their offensive coordinator, people have been asking to fire Canada for weeks now. They got lucky. Pickett called his own play, threw it downfield. They were able to get 6 to George Pickens. You know, those are the type of plays that are not going to happen every single week. For the Steelers, good on them for winning the game. I just don't like the Steelers. Like, I don't like Kenny Pickett. He hasn't proven to me that he's that guy that's going to take the team to the next level. The other thing is Najee Harris isn't running the ball. Warren's the best back on the field right now. Warren runs the best of any of their backs. It's hard to do. You sort of have to take the ball out of Najee's hand until he proves otherwise. I'd give the ball more to Warren because of how well he's playing. The Pittsburgh Steelers have to get back to the old school of running the football. Like, that's what you have to do with a rookie quarterback. And I'd argue that's what most of these teams outside of even the Texans are doing with Dameon Pierce. If you want to find consistency for your young quarterback, being able to establish a running game is going to open up lanes in the pass game to help him throw. If you can't run the football, it's putting way too much pressure on your rookie quarterback or just a young quarterback at that, even when you look at Love with the Packers. They're not able to run the football, so what are they doing? They're putting it all on Love's shoulders. And how's that working out? Ain't working out so good. For the rest of our next division, since we were talking about it, we'll go AFC East. We talked about Buffalo earlier. Buffalo, it has to be one of the more frustrating things in the world to be a Buffalo Bills fan. You sit back, you watch them beat the Dolphins, and you're like, dude, Buffalo's here. We're beating the Dolphins. They just scored 70 points. Like, this is our division. And then you go play Jacksonville, and you look anemic for, I would argue, 90% of the game. Yes, they had 7 points, but it wasn't until the end of the game that the offense came into drive, and it's frustrating because you're sitting there watching that game going, guys, why can you not play like this for the first 3 quarters of this football game? It is so frustrating to watch them just not have the consistency. Stephon Diggs is sort of a diva, you know, whether that's a good thing, bad thing. I think all wide receivers are. You look at the great ones, minus Jerry Rice. That's the only guy that I've never really seen throw a fit on the sidelines. I'm sure there's videotape out there of him doing so. I haven't seen it yet. The Bills on paper should be better. The issue is that the Bills can't move the football when they need to throughout the game, and they just have these off games that you sit back and you're like, guys, what are y'all doing? The good news for the Bills is their only competition in the division right now is the Dolphins. And I say right now because I still like the Jets. Like, the Jets have a good football team. If they had, that will be the question of the year, is if Aaron Rodgers doesn't go down, how good are the Jets really? Because when you watch them play, they are in every game. They have the ability to win these games. Even against Dallas, I get that they lost big there at the end. They were playing Dallas well. If you put a different quarterback in, who knows where this team goes? They end up beating the Broncos this week. It was a huge game for the Jets, and Hackett to be able to go in there. It's an even worse game for the Broncos. We'll get into that here in a minute for how bad of a team they are right now. For the Jets, there's been a lot of talk about, hey, maybe they'll go trade for Kirk Cousins. I don't think the Jets are going to do anything this year at the position of quarterback other than Zach Wilson and maybe like Trevor Siemian. The reason I say this is Rodgers is coming back. Rodgers is their guy. There's a chance, according to Aaron Rodgers, that he plays at the end of this year. I don't think that's crazy. When you meet professional athletes, are just a different breed. Think about, Kobe tore his ACL or tore his Achilles and went out and shot 2 more free throws. And then he was playing competitive basketball in record time the next year that no one thought that Kobe was going to be able to do. When a guy puts his mind to it, these are special athletes. They're able to do things that I would argue most people around the country just aren't able to do due to mindset and being able to work through things and be diligent. Also, they have the money, the resources around them to get the best types of treatment, do anything that they need to get their bodies right. If Rodgers is able to come back with the Jets in a playoff position, watch out. Watch out. The Jets are a good football team. Their record doesn't show it, but they are a good football team. The Patriots, on the other hand, are a terrible football team. You feel bad for Mac Jones. You sort of feel bad for the whole organization and I'm not even a Patriots fan. It's hard to watch them play football because they look terrible in all facets of the game. Defense can't stop anybody. Offense looks just awful. And I think that's the reason. I know a lot of people have been like, why have they not started Zappe? And it's like, because Zappe's not going to change what's going on right now on the field. Like, wide receivers aren't getting open. When they are getting open, they're literally batting the balls up in the air, getting them picked. You look at the team as a whole, and it's just a bad football team all around. There are good players in certain positions, but for the most part, the Patriots are just a bad football team, which leaves us with the Dolphins. The Dolphins are sitting there on the other end of the spectrum that you go, the Dolphins have a great chance to not just win this division, but go deep in the playoffs if not get to a Super Bowl. It's all about, can their offense make the plays and get into rhythm? Last week, they were able to do so. The Dolphins really came out and shined when they needed to. You sit back and think about them playing the Giants. Giants are a terrible football team. Never really in doubt that whole game. The only thing that happened for the Dolphins was the pick 6 with the Giants. Outside of that, the Dolphins' defense looked good against the Giants. I like the Dolphins. Like, there's too much of a reason to not be picking the Dolphins in this division. I get they lose to Buffalo. We'll see how they play in the following weeks. They get an easy matchup this week against the Panthers. They should blow them out of the water. I'd say easily by 21 points. I think I've already said that once. That's just sort of where my gut is with the AFC. And then wrapping out the AFC, we'll talk about the AFC West. Vegas comes out and beats the Packers, which it's not difficult to do when you have an outside linebacker that is weighing more than 250 pounds that doesn't run as fast as Devontae Smith or Devontae Adams lined up on Devontae Adams. Like that, I sit back and look at the Packers and you just scratch your head at what they're doing. But for the Raiders position, they were able to come out and win the game. Jacoby Myers looked really good. My biggest thing for the Raiders is, what are you doing with Hunter Renfrow? Like, I think through 5 games, he's caught 4 passes. You question how they're using their offense. I still think it's crazy to say when you have someone like Sean Payton and other guys. I still think Josh McDaniels is the worst coach in all the NFL. He fails to utilize his players correctly, fails to put them in a good position. They win in spite of him. But from a team's standpoint, you really question everything that's going on with the Raiders. I'd love to sit back and tell you that they are going to win more games and compete in the division. I don't think that because of the Chargers and because of the Chiefs. I think they played a bad and getting worse Packers team and was able to put them away. The Raiders this week, they catch the Patriots. It's another game that right now the Raiders are sitting at a 3-point favorite. Based upon how the Patriots have played, if there was really a lot of faith in the Raiders, they'd be a 10-point favorite any day of the week because the Patriots are playing that bad. There's just inconsistencies. Jimmy G's thrown some picks that you really scratch your head and go, what were we doing? Like, how did you make that throw? The team itself is sort of a mess, and they're playing a team that's a complete and utter mess. I think that the Raiders are going to win the game just because I don't like the Patriots offense in any sense. That I would take, the only team that I would take the Patriots offense over is the Broncos. And that speaks volumes about the Broncos. You got Sean Payton. I know me and Maul said here at the beginning of the season, and you sit back and you go, the Broncos have to be better than they were last year. Russell is playing better statistically wise, but in the win-loss column, they're not there. The Broncos are sitting here at 1-4, and you sit back and you go, what is going on? They're just not they can't get a running game established, which is a huge part. Wide receivers are not showing up. I love Jerry Jeudy in college, but man, talk about a guy that you never see at those moments on the field that you're like, this is the guy that we drafted. Here's the first round pick. This guy is shining out, balling out. He's someone that we're getting the ball to every play. And the only reason I say, is it Jerry Jeudy or is it the Broncos, is the Broncos are a mess. Like, you just don't know. Is it the players that you have on the field? Is it coaching? Is it just Russell Wilson? I don't know. But I do know one thing, and that is they are a garbage can floating down a river on fire. They're a complete dumpster fire. 100% mess. The other two teams in the division, you got the Chargers, who have a really good week, coming off a bye, go play the Cowboys. As I've already said, I don't like the Cowboys. I don't think they're a playoff team. I have the Chargers winning this game. I believe, and it's a Monday night game. Dallas is picked by 2.5. Give me the Chargers. I like what they bring offensively. Austin Eckler is supposed to be back this week. I like this team. I like Khalil Mack going against Dak Prescott. I like Derwin James going against Dak Prescott. I pretty much like any defense going against Dak Prescott. He's going to throw some picks and throw some questionable passes. You sit back, the Chargers, this is a key game for them coming off the bye. They should win it. They're underdogs. Give me the Chargers Monday night. I really like this football team going forward. I think they have a lot of talent. It's just a matter of can the Chargers, sort of like the Browns and other teams, can the Chargers not do Chargers things? It's a game that they should win on paper. I think that's why Vegas has them an underdog, because you just don't trust the Chargers. But that's where we're at. The final team in the division is the Chiefs. The biggest news out of the Chiefs, they were able to hang on and win last week against the Vikings. Didn't play their best game. This week, when you look at them, they're playing. Let me take a look real quick as I'm scanning the roster. Chiefs play the Broncos. Chiefs are going to murder the Broncos. I don't know why I didn't know that they play tomorrow night. Take the Chiefs by 28 points. The Chiefs are going to murder the Broncos. It will not be a close game. Period. Now, I say that and watch it be just like it was. I remember thinking the exact same thing last year, and the Broncos took them down to the wire, and the Broncos were battling. We'll see what type of Chiefs come out. The biggest thing that came out of the win against the Vikings is the health scare with Travis Kelce. It looks like his ankle is going to be okay. I still like Gray, their other tight end. He's a good playmaker. Does he have the threat capability that Travis Kelce has? No, just because that chemistry that he's built with Mahomes, it's very difficult to stop. I like the Chiefs in this matchup big just because of how bad the Broncos are playing. They look terrible on offense. I like the Chiefs defense. Hopefully they get Bolton back next week. That's going to be a big help to their defense. You're still looking for Chris Jones to become more and more dominant. He took a few weeks off at the beginning of the season, getting a new contract. This is a primetime game for Chris Jones to just terrorize Russell Wilson for a whole game. That's what I expect to see out of the Chiefs. Now, as we go into the NFC and wrap up with the rest of the NFL this week, we'll start off with the NFC West. We talked about the 49ers. I think they're the best team in football right now. Bar none. It'd be difficult to stop them. They have so many weapons, great coaching, great weapons. Defense looks great. It's hard to find a weakness with this team. Are they going to go undefeated? Statistics and history tell us no. Only 17 Dolphins have done so. They're going to. I look more at their matchup here in a few weeks when they take on the Eagles. That's going to be a huge game. They get the Browns this weekend. It's a good test for the 49ers just to go against a little bit better of a defense, but I still like the 49ers. Taking a look at the Seahawks, we talked about them going against the Bengals. The Seahawks just need to find a way to utilize the guys that they have on their team better. You've got Metcalf, you've got Smith and Jigba, and the guy that I keep Lockett. You got Lockett and you got Walker. all those guys combined with Geno Smith, you would sit back and think that the Seahawks are putting up 40 points a game. They have too much potential to not be scoring more. I like the Seahawks. I just want to see them perform more consistently, especially coming out of a bye. We'll see how they play with the Bengals. The Rams, the Rams played the Eagles well, and it's so difficult now that they have Cooper Kupp back. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that is going to be a combination that teams are going to struggle with all year long. Both of those guys are fire in terms of catching the football, and you can't double team one without, putting man on the other. I like the Rams. They're a good football team. This whole division's good. Like, the Cardinals are good. The Cardinals had the Bengals. Until Josh Dobbs threw that pick six, they're on their own 1 yard line. The Cardinals were building that momentum, and that just changed the entire game from that moment forward. I think if the Cardinals had went down and got 6 out of that and somehow took a 99-yard drive and made it 21-10 at that point, the Cardinals would go on to win that football game. It's just sort of how the momentum rises and falls. That play was huge for the Bengals. The Bengals never let up after that play. But the Cardinals are still a good football team. I still think that 3 teams coming out of the NFC West for playoffs. I still have the 49ers, Seahawks, and Rams all being playoff teams. They are that good in terms of a division, which I don't think a lot of people saw, especially out of the Rams being that one playoff team that's getting in. They looked tremendous, even though they don't have a whole lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Then the final divisions, the NFC East. The Eagles, yet again, they get another win, but there's something about this team. I've said a lot about the offensive coordinator. You're not seeing them get into that playmaking potential. And a big piece of this, what I've noticed is that A.J. Brown hasn't been getting those shots that you'd like to see. I don't know whether it's him being double teamed. I just haven't watched enough of their games consistently to be able to speak matter of fact to it. Devontae Smith is catching a whole lot more, which begs to say, well, then you've got A.J. Brown not catching a lot. Our team's double teaming him. They have a lot of weapons on that offense, and I think that it's about refining their product. Once the Eagles go into a bye here in a few weeks, I think they'll come out of the bye a completely different team for the better than they were going before. But they're still showing that as good of a football team they are, they're undefeated. Like, it's hard to doubt the Eagles right now. Looking this week who they got coming up, they get the Jets. I think it's a great chance for the Eagles to go up against a really good defense. Like, the Eagles' defense should terrorize. I mean, poor, bless his heart, Zach Wilson's going to be running for his life against that Eagles defense behind that offensive line. The Eagles should cruise to victory right now. The Eagles are only a 7-point favorite, which I think speaks to more of the inconsistencies that you're seeing out of the Eagles offense. But we'll see how they go going forward. I think it's a great matchup for their offense going against that defense. I'll be watching that game. That'll be a great one to watch. Then you have the rest of the division. You got the Cowboys. You already know how I feel about the Cowboys. They're overrated. They play the Chargers. Give me the Chargers. And then the rest of the division is absolute garbage. Hot garbage. The Commanders and the Giants. The Giants this week are not even going to have Daniel Jones. He's going to look like he's going down with a neck injury. I wouldn't play Saquon. The Giants, they're sitting there playing the Bills. Right now, the Bills, I believe, are a 14-point favorite. That could easily be in the 20s. Easily be in the 20s. They should cover 14 every Sunday and twice on Mondays. It's too rich of a matchup for Buffalo to not come in that game and destroy the Giants because of how much talent the Giants are missing. And even if the Giants had all their talent, they're still not a good football team on the offensive side of the ball. The only thing that helps the Giants is the Bills' defense lost middle linebacker. They've lost a corner. They've lost some other guys off that defensive side of the football. I don't know what Von Miller's injury status is right now, but if they can't get him back, it helps the Giants. But if Von Miller's out on the field, give Buffalo by 1 million. I'll come back. The Commanders, we can talk about here just momentarily. It is a team that underperforms. They have too many guys on the offensive and defensive side of the ball that you sit back and you go, they should be better. I know other commentators like Pat McAfee have said, and I like Ron Rivera. He's a great guy, great human being, tremendous player on the 85 Bears. You sit back and you feel for Ron Rivera, but at the same time, they're not playing like a team that you want to see. And that falls on coaching. I think with the new leadership change for the Washington organization, Rivera's on a hot seat. He'll be gone at a minimum by the end of the year, if not sooner. You need to see more out of the Commanders. I can't really emphasize it more than that. They're just not performing for the people they have in the roster. It's not there. It's just not there, and it's sad to watch. The Cowboys, on the other hand, you sit back and watch them, and you go, it's a mess. It's a hot mess express. They're unable, and this is sort of the sad thing with the Cowboys. When you look at them a few years ago, and I'll just reference this because I'm still a stickler for this. They trade Amari Cooper out to Cleveland because they have CeeDee Lamb. They get rid of Dalton Schultz. They've paid Ezekiel Elliott too much money. They fail to get guys on the defensive side of the ball. And, you look at the Jaden Smith, the linebacker. They get Micah Parsons, great draft pick. I'm not going to argue that. Amazing player on the defensive side of the ball, one of the best in all of pro football. From an organizational standpoint, Jerry Jones continues to abuse this roster to the point that this is why they haven't won a championship in almost 30 years. It's the reason Jerry Jones and his hands in making player personnel decisions, it's not there. When you think about what Jerry Jones is, yes, he made one really good move. He traded Herschel Walker to the Vikings, got all that draft capital, was able to go out and get Emmett, go out and get Irvin. They built the championship team of the 90s. And even then, if you talk to some of these players, like one of the things that has come out in the past few weeks is that Troy Aikman was talking about it. Jimmy Johnston's name was supposed to go up in the Cowboys Ring of Honor. Still hasn't gone up. And it's because of Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones doesn't like Jimmy. But Jimmy won them a championship. If Jimmy doesn't part with the Cowboys, due in part only to Jerry Jones, who knows how good the Cowboys continue to be throughout the rest of the 90s. Like, they could have easily won more Super Bowls with Jimmy as a head coach, but you had an owner that thought he knew better, and it's proven that Jerry does know better. And Jerry consistently has made bad decisions. And for the past 25 years, the Cowboys have continued to struggle, and they're going to continue to lose these big games because of the organizational decisions that are made by Jerry Jones. And I thought that the draft combine showed it more than anything. Here's Jerry calling, being like, well, tell me about this kid. Like, what, the guy was really going to say anything bad. Not that the kid was good or bad either way. But then you see Jerry being like, if we don't get one of these two guys, I'm really going to be upset. And it's like, all that stuff, you need to have a board that you sit back and you go, if this guy's here, we're taking him. It's making decisions like that in haste on draft day gets you the exact product you got right now. It's just an up and down roster because you haven't consistently gotten the guys that you need to, and it continues to be the Cowboys. Now, it's great from my standpoint because it's great watching Cowboy fans cry every year as they get the brakes beat off them by the 49ers. As I said last week, Cowboys got that Marlboro red color, just Cowboy killers. That's all the 49ers do. And then Debo, I loved it, came out and said, Micah Parsons was like, well, we'll meet again. And Debo was like, it's going to be even worse next time. 100%. 49ers best football team in the NFL right now, and they proved against Cowboys. Cowboys have just played bad teams. We'll get to see this week as they play the Chargers, who I think are a better team than the Cowboys. We'll find out a lot more about the Chargers than we will the Cowboys. But it's great watching. Who doesn't like watching the Cowboys lose? Except for Cowboy fans. That's it. But ultimately, that wraps up this week's episode of the NFL. Hope you enjoyed it. Please follow and subscribe on our YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram channels for our podcast. Go to our website, footballtalksquadron.com, for our other media channels. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Time to pull chalks.